It might be because I cuss words in the title of the video. I was like, YouTube won't care as much as TikTok if I say it straight, but YouTube apparently cares as much as TikTok if I say it straight. So, um, obviously, we all kind of know what today is here in the United States. Um, and I think that a lot of people haven't understood what today really signifies for a long time. And in the last, 10 years, people are starting to really wake up to, what has happened today on, a kind of indigenous thought process, more like hearing the side that we're not told in school kind of shit. Um, and so I think that people are kind of shifting their understanding of today, which I think is an amazing thing. I think we should always be shifting our understanding to understand things a little bit better. And so I think that it's a good day to talk about some of the things that we are shifting our understanding on, and some of the ways that we can maybe find that we can get um, better ways to do it, right? Where we can make it a better way to do it, right? And so I thought that I would come in and go ahead and do that today, mainly because I just, with what today is, I think that it is important that we hold space for that knowledge, and we hold space for that thought process and how to make those changes, so that we can actually, encourage those changes in other people, and so that we can find ways to make those changes ourselves. Um, and so that we as a group, on a broad scale, can actually do better, right? And so I wanted to go ahead and hold that space today and maybe do some conversating about it, and maybe have some, information. Hello, beautiful. And maybe talk about some of the ways that we can change going forward to kind of make it a little bit of an easier path, or maybe find ways to do better in honoring and do better in understanding. Um, of course, we talk so much in this chat about how to decolonize and how to find ancestry, how to change perspective, how to work towards a better global community and a better local community. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and in different countries and stuff too, that kind of understanding shifting is important too, right? Like we have to see the understanding of what's going on shift on a broad scale, just like we as a globe need to see the shift in understanding for the Qumran, and we need to see the shift in understanding for the Palestinians, right? We need to, as a global community, start to understand what is going on with indigenous groups, with those who are marginalized in a global sense, right? Are not marginalized in a global sense, but those are marginalized in other parts of the globe that we might not be in, right? So I think that it's really important that we discuss those things. I almost actually did my Free Palestine thing today. But I think that when we're looking at, the global scale of understanding and having that shift of understanding that no matter how much the United States puts out how they're the good guys, that the United States isn't the good guy, and they've never been the good guy, right? And no matter how much Israel puts out that they're the good guy, they're not. They haven't been since the founding of the first state of Israel, right? So um, understanding that the Scandinavians aren't the indigenous people of Scandinavia, the Sami are, right? Where people don't understand that. And is going on, what is going on for the Sami in their attempts to try and decolonize and try and have reclamation for themselves as well. What is going on for the Ainu? What is going on for the different people across the globe? Well, they're trying to live with the ability to understand the world themselves, and to look through it through their eyes, and not have to deal with the colonized thought process that so many are having to deal with, right? Um, well, the act of colonization itself is killing people. Like colonization actually, like there's not an instance in the history of anything that colonization has been enacted and people haven't died. Like it hasn't been a brutal thing. So um, I'm not saying that all the colonialists today are brutal baby killers, as you stated in your chat, but I am going to state that the act of colonization itself kills children, and the act of colonization itself kills people, and the act of colonization itself destroys culture. I often go over a couple of different definitions, and this is a good time to go over the definition of colonization, right? So, when we're looking at the way that people move across the planet, there's a couple of different ways that people move across the planet. We have migration, which is moving into a space where nobody's at and, settling into that space. Or maybe you belong to a group that migrates through the seasons, right? Why do you think that there are different kinds? That's such a racist, nasty, like, take it out. Um, and Migration either is moving into a space that's not occupied or it's something that you do as a yearly pattern for food sustenance. Immigration is moving into a space that has occupation, like there are people there, but becoming a part of the society that you're moving into. So when people immigrate to the United States, they become a part of the United States society. They run for office, or they start a business, or they send their children to local school, or they go to local churches. They become a part. I know how the world got populated. Me, myself, as an archaeologist who studies how the world got populated, I know exactly how the world got populated. And I'm telling you the three different ways the world got populated right now. So you can listen or you can run your mouth. Your choice. So immigration is moving into a space that is already occupied. Oh, you nasty piece. You can take your nasty out of my chat. Um, and becoming a part of the society that is already there, right? Becoming a part of, uh, you're disrespecting me. Don't think that you can treat people with disrespect and they're supposed to come at you without showing you the disrespect that you're treating them with. You're disrespecting me. And don't think that you can come into somebody else's home and demand respect because you came into my home and demanded that I respect you. So take it elsewhere. Colonization is moving into a space where culture is already there and there are people already there who have a culture, who have a government, who have people, right? And taking over that culture and taking over that government and replacing it with your own. That is the act of colonization. And there is no time in the history of the world that the act of colonization hasn't been done through violence. Now, we have moved across this entire planet without colonizing this entire planet. It's not until the point that we get to, I think colonization in itself starts roughly 3,000 years ago. Before 3,000 years ago, acts of colonization are not what is going on. Okay. Now, there is acts of brutality in our earliest city buildings. There is acts of brutality in our first acts of war and our first acts of violence. Absolutely come through the building of city, through the building of civilization, through fighting with people that are there, people that are moving across. Colonization itself doesn't come until later when you get people who decide that they're going to colonize an entire space. Like my tiny little city is going to move over there and take over your big space, and I'm going to kill you to do it. So, colonization is not how we've moved across the globe. Colonization is not how we've gotten to the places that we're at. Colonization is not how indigenous people got to Turtle Island or Abayala or to Australia. Colonization is not what was done in Africa prior to the Europeans deciding to colonize Africa. Colonization was not done in the vast majorities of the eastern part of Eurasia until we see later colonization happening that we have documented, right? All documents all documentation and all evidence in the archaeological record shows that that is not what is going on prior, right? So colonization is not how we get across the globe. How we get across the globe is migration and sometimes immigration. So if we're moving into a space that Neanderthals are already in and we become a part of the Neanderthal culture, that is immigration, right? And that is what the evidence shows is that there's immigration, right? That there is not colonization. There's migration and immigration, but not colonization prior. So, when we're looking at what is going on as people are moving across the globe and colonization is happening, it is always brutal. It is always violent. When you are trying to erase somebody's culture, you cannot do that without brutality. You cannot erase somebody's culture without brutalizing them. The act of erasing culture itself is a brutal act, right? I mean, if you just wrap your logic brain around it, stop listening to your Bible brain, stop listening to your indoctrinated brain, and wrap the logic brain that you have around it. Replacing somebody's culture or erasing a person is always a violent act just by the act itself. Even if you were to do it in the most loving manner, you are still erasing somebody's existence. You are still erasing somebody's knowledge. You are still erasing culture. You are still erasing people. I am an archaeologist and an anthropologist, and I can tell you anything you want to know about the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens interaction. So I'm not thinking I know. I know. And I have documentation to back it up. Okay. So if you're new to my chat, TikTok gives everybody with 1,000 followers a chat. They give them a live space and they get to come in and they get to talk. I am Witta. I'm an archaeologist, an anthropologist, a historian, a healer, a storyteller. I am globally mixed Indigenous, and I use this space to bring in my knowledge and share that because I do not believe that knowledge should be gate-kept behind a $40,000 a year paywall. And I don't believe that knowledge should be gate-kept behind large vocabulary that's hard even for people with multiple degrees to understand. And so I come into TikTok and I give people a basic understanding and a basic knowledge of the things that I know. I have a website, it's not on this one, but it's in my profile that you can go to and you can find sources for the things that I state. Now, again, it's a basic, small level, ground level, just so you have a foundation, so you know things to go and search. You can go to my website and you can look up the articles I have there, and then you can take them and you can dig further because I personally see and I personally believe that when people are doing their own research and doing their own study and doing their own looking into things, they learn better. When you're passionate about something, when you want to know something, you learn it better. So I give you a foundation so that you can go and do some more research, so that you can go and find some more information. This is a basic level education, right? It's not going to get you a college degree. I'm not trying to be a professor. I'm not trying to be a teacher. As a disabled war vet, I can't work for others. So it's not like I'm out working in a school. I'm doing this out of love. I'm doing this because to me, the facts that most of us don't know are what are holding most of us back. The lack of knowledge is what's holding most of us back. And so, if I can give you the ability to find that knowledge and dig a little deeper and understand a little bit more, maybe you can get ahead. Maybe you can understand better. Maybe you can grasp a few things, right? In my space, I will teach you how race was debunked. Race is a theory that was built for a colonial construct to justify European atrocity by Europeans, right? It has been debunked. It doesn't exist. My field created the theory of race and my field debunked the theory of race, right? I don't deal with racism in my chat very well. You will not like my response. If you want to be a racist asshat, you can scroll on, go somewhere else, get 1,000 followers, be a racist asshat in your own chat. I also don't deal with phobias based on gender, desire, or religion, or deal with your Bible. I don't like your God. Your God's a narcissist. He's a jerk. Treats you like crap, treats everybody else around you like crap, tells everybody else to treat everybody else like crap. I don't want to deal with him. I'm also not going to deal with your Islamophobia or your anti Semitism because I don't need to deal with your God, A, and B, I spent a year in an Islamic camp as a child. I knew Islam before I knew Christianity, much more beautiful religion. Not that any of them are based on a decent God, anyways. I'm not going to deal with your phobias. And I'm not going to deal with your phobias based on gender or desire. There are three biological sexes: male, female, and intersex. And gender is a perception in my own head. It has nothing to fucking do with you, and I get to choose. It's mine, not yours. And desire, same fucking thing. So if you want to take your phobias and your gender and desire and go along and do it somewhere else. Don't do it in my fucking chat. You usually have some good mods in here. You act like a dick, you're going to get muted. You don't like it, go somewhere else. If it's not for you, scroll the fuck along. Nobody needs your opinion. Now, if you want to stay and listen, please, right? That's what I'm here for, so that you can learn something new, so that you can get out of the indoctrination that is killing you. And I'll guarantee you, right or left, up or down, it doesn't matter. It's killing us all because stratified society and the government is not about helping you. Absolutely. Let me know if I have more mods in here other than Sleepy. I was a historian before I was an archaeologist and an anthropologist. I've studied history extensively for decades, and I know more about history than you do. I don't think so, Sleepy. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go ahead and turn the comments on for off for a little while, and that way you can take off levity. Have fun at work. So in my chat, which we have off at this point of time, I don't deal with those things. We'll talk about it a little bit more because I will turn it back on so that everybody can ask questions. Questions are important and they're an important way to learn, right? So if you have questions, you can either go to the YouTube over there, which I'm streaming on at the same time, and ask your questions over there, or you can wait a little bit and I'll turn the comments back on so that everybody can have a conversation and everybody can talk about things. If I get some of my mods in here, we might be able to. Awesome. Thank you, my love. We might be able to turn the comments back on. I just try and keep it safe for everybody. This is a safe space for everybody, right? And sometimes the trolls or the nasties can get a little bit too much in my comments, you know. Anti-science, anti-evolution, pro-God just doesn't turn out right half the time. So what we're going to be discussing today is what is really going on around us with this holiday, right? We're in the middle. Today is a holiday within the United States. It's a federally recognized holiday within the United States, and it's a federally recognized holiday of trauma. And so we want to talk a little bit about what that means and, you know, how we can kind of shift shift the understanding of it and shift the way that we're working. Because for my belief system, for what I see and what I see in all of my studies is that for the most part, everybody has this very kind and generous soul, right? Most people are kind. Most people want to be good to each other. This is because we are biologically nurturing and communal. Unfortunately, many of us have been indoctrinated into thinking things. Many of us have been taught things that are falsities, and many of us have been indoctrinated into this idea that you're not supposed to seek out more information. You know, the Bible tells me, and since the Bible tells me so, that's all I need. School told me, and since school told me so, that's all I need. I don't need more information. I don't need more education. We've lost this understanding that humanity is about knowledge. We are driven biologically to create, to see new things, to learn new things, to make change. That's a big part of who we are. That's a big part of our niche within the biome. It's a big part of who we are as a species. It is literally what took us from Homo erectus having fire to you sitting here with a cell phone, that quest for knowledge. And for many of us, we've been indoctrinated out of having that quest for knowledge. And because we've been indoctrinated out of having that quest for knowledge, we have a much harder time wanting to know, right? And this actually creates in people this kind of icky feeling, this kind of boredom, right? A lot of people get like nasty and start treating people like shit, or a lot of people get like, you know, like they start searching out for things that aren't necessarily a positive thing, right? This quest for knowledge is so innate within who we are as a species that when we fail to have it, right, it causes a lot of problems. So I want people to understand things on a different scale and see things on a different scale. I want to bring you a little bit of knowledge. Now, I don't study United States history from a United States perspective. I never have. It's never been my thing. When I was taught history as a child, I was taught history through the Black and Indigenous perspective. I was given Black and Indigenous authors to read. That's how I learned to read that in archaeology texts. And I was told from a very young age who all of my ancestors were, and told that you must know all of your ancestors and all of the things that they went through so that you can be an honor to them, right? And so from a very young age, that's what I've really striven to do. I knew about my Black grandmother who was brought over on the Middle Passage. I knew about her escape. I knew about her children passing. I knew about how that struggle was. And so I read about that struggle through other people's eyes so I could understand it. You can hear my voice, right? And I knew about my Indigenous ancestors and the struggles that they had gone through. And so I spent a lot of time studying those things. And of course, as I got older, I started studying the European ancestry that I obviously have. So I have a broad understanding of my ancestry and where much of this comes from, but I don't have a broad understanding of the United States history other than the colonization part of it and other than what has happened within that colonization part because of the fact that for me, well, first of all, the United States is not that old, right? It doesn't, it's not history, it's not real history, right? And second of all, the brutality, right? And what has actually happened. Hearing it from an indigenous or a black perspective was something that I could deal with. Hearing it from the United States perspective, where they gaslight and they deny and they cover it up and shit like that, was not something I could handle. Stood up in kindergarten and told my teacher that I couldn't celebrate Columbus Day because Columbus was a murderer and a genocider, and he was not on my list. Um, and that's who I've been my entire life. So when we're talking about Thanksgiving, when I grew up, the indigenous people that I grew up with, my second mother, my aunties, and of course my mother being indigenous, so she wasn't Baha'i, but the indigenous people around me, other than my mother, were all Baha'i. And so we didn't celebrate a lot of holidays anyways, right? Yet we did see other people celebrate holidays, and I understood that we didn't celebrate those holidays because we were Baha'i, not because we were indigenous, right? I did understand from a very young age that these holidays were never what they said they were. That Christmas was not Christmas. Christ was born in March. Motherfuckers of Pisces. And not in the middle of the winter. 25th of December is Saturnalia, and that's why we celebrate Saturnalia, a pagan holiday. And of course, we use Yule to celebrate Saturnalia, all pagan. I knew all of these things growing up, right? I knew growing up that even the story that they tell us in school of what Thanksgiving is weird and icky. And so let's sit with that for just a second of what the story they tell us in school of what Thanksgiving is. And what you can really hear when you listen to this, right? So we all know that the Plymouth landed on Plymouth Rock, right? Or the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock. And we all know that by the time the Pilgrims got to Plymouth Rock, they had been at sea for several months. They're escaping persecution by the church in England. The Pilgrims had gone to Holland to escape that persecution, but were being persecuted in Holland. So they left Holland and they went to the New World, right? As they called it. Obviously, that's not what it is. And when they land on Plymouth Rock, we see that the Pilgrims are destitute, right? They didn't come with a lot of knowledge and they didn't come with a lot of abilities, right? And so here they are, not even really able to build their own homes in many cases. They don't understand the world around them. And these very welcoming, loving people who have this generosity of spirit come in and they give them help. Now, this is the story that we're taught in school, that these destitute human beings who are unable to take care of themselves are being helped by these extremely loving, beautiful human beings who are willing to, in their generosity of spirit, teach them how to live in a new space, allow them a little bit of space, teach them how to deal with this little bit of space, teach them how to interact. They teach them how to grow food in this little space because they don't have food. And so they give them food and then they teach them how to grow food. And after that first winter of destitution, and the next winter is coming up, right? And they have learned from the people in the area. And again, this is the school's teachings. They have learned from the people in the area how to build their homes. They've learned from the people in the area and the generosity of spirit that the people in the area have, how to live within this space. And they have learned how to farm within this space, or at least farm the things that grow right in this space. Of course, they're not farming in the way that the space farms because um, North America or Turtle Island was a garden from coast to coast, north to south, east to west. It was a tended garden. So they're not learning how to tend. They're bringing their own farming techniques, but they're utilizing the foods that the indigenous people and their generosity of spirit are teaching them how to grow. So we've all probably heard how, you plant the corn and you put a fish at the base of the corn, because the corn eats the fish and blah, 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 and it grows up big and strong, right? And then we've all probably heard about how at the end of that first year, after having been through a very desolating winter and going through and learning and growing and being taught through this generosity of spirit, they all decide to have a feast and they just decide to invite the indigenous people in some form of generosity. Here, let me invite you to your land and feed you your food, right? And that the indigenous people came with all of this abundance and they celebrated a feast together. And that in thanks for what the indigenous people had done at the area, we now celebrate Thanksgiving. Now, this is a story that we've all heard in school, right? And there's a lot of problems with that story in the fact that it's not true, but there's a lot of problems with that story if you listen to it and you know the history on any level of the United States, because we all know the history of the United States is violent, right? That, first of all, these are English citizens, right? And England is not sending their best, right? Jamestown is full of criminals, right? And we all know that after this, there are violent acts that the pilgrims commit against the indigenous people of the area. We've all heard of the massacres. We've all heard of the attacks, right? Even if we did not understand Pocahontas's story as a child, most of us know what happened to Matoka now as an adult. You know, we understand that there was a lot of violence from the European settling towards the indigenous people, right? And we have known this from school. We have known this from the beginning. This is stuff that is taught to us in school, that the European settling of Turtle Island was a violent settling, right? That they attacked people, that there were wars, right? This is something that they teach us in school, along with teaching us how the indigenous people come and save the Europeans' ass. So, what we are taught in school as a base level of understanding is Europeans arrive here desolate. They are treated with generosity of spirit and reciprocity and love, and what they give in return is pain. What they give in return is murder. What they give in return is hate. So, we're being thankful that people are treating us with love while we're treating them with hate. That's what Thanksgiving is from the perspective of the school teachings. If you actually look at it instead of just believe the gaslight of it, right? If you take a look at all of the different facts that they tell you and you put them together, you see that we're looking at people who are giving and giving and giving, and each give is met with violence. Every time a give happens, it's met with violence. Okay. So these are the things, even in basic school, that we're learning, right? Of course, a lot of times there's a lot of hide of what the Europeans are doing and how the violent acts are happening. And there's a lot of, oh, the indigenous people did this, right? So that there is that ability to shift the blame, that ability to gaslight, that ability to create this idea within your head that the Europeans weren't the ones perpetuating violence, right? Yet, anybody who looks at all of the different stories that we hear, even in grade school, can see that they either add up one way or they don't add up at all. That either we're being gaslit, either there's something more to the situation, either it looks like this or it just doesn't add up, right? Now, as we get older and we start to actually study and we start to look, many of us have found deeper truth, right? Many of us have found things like many of us today know that Pocahontas wasn't even named Pocahontas, that her name was Matoka, and that she was a child when she was stolen by the Europeans and gang raped, right? Sexually assaulted, gang style, by a bunch of European men. A 15-year-old girl who left behind a husband and a child. When she was stolen, her husband killed in the stealing of her. Her child left behind an infant son. And then she was taken and assaulted by a group of men, physically and sexually, and then forced to marry somebody by the age of 16. Forced to marry a European man who she had no care for and no feelings for. That forced to marry that European man stopped the captivity and the sexual violence that was happening against her. She was forced to bear 2 children to that European man. She was taken to Europe and paraded around like a prize and died before she could ever make it home. Okay. Many of us, in digging deeper, now understand the true story of what happened to Matoka, right? Many of us, in digging deeper, now understand the true story of what happened with Thanksgiving as well. There is a massacre against the Piapot, and this massacre in the 1600s becomes celebrated. And this massacre that the Europeans commit, where they slaughter women and children, this act of brutal colonization, because we know colonization is brutal by the definition of colonization, this unaliving of women and children, this large scale attack, and then the Europeans parading their scalps, because the Europeans started that shit too, parading their prizes, go home and celebrate how they slaughtered women and children. And today, we have been gaslighted to believe that it was instead the generosity of spirit of the indigenous people that we are celebrating. Now, don't get me wrong, we should be celebrating the generosity of spirit of indigenous people every fucking day of the year. We should not be gaslit about the fact that the generosity of spirit of indigenous people was not met with kindness. It was not reciprocated. It was met with death. It was met with slaughter. It was met with violence. So we have to understand, as we're celebrating this holiday, and as we're celebrating many other holidays, that these holidays are a celebration of violence. These holidays are a celebration of destruction, of massacre, of unethical, by their own set standards, actions. Unethical, by their own set standard, actions. Generosity of spirit met with violence. So how do we flip this? How do we shift this? How do we move forward in a way that is positive to hold accountability for the actions that have actually happened of many of our forebears, and to try and undo some of the trauma and some of the harm? To me, I think that we celebrate this day in an entirely different way. There are many indigenous people out there who celebrate this day as a day of feasting or a day of mourning, right? Yet, not yet. And in this, we see a way that we can celebrate this day in a way of positivity. Now, across the globe, harvest has been celebrated across the globe. Every single year, every single people, every single group celebrates harvest, celebrates the fall, celebrates the last moments of abundance before starvation. And that's what this is. It's a celebration. Our harvest feasts is a celebration of the last moments of abundance before starvation, right? So if we are instead turning this day into a celebration day, a resilience day, right? Maybe instead of calling it Thanksgiving, we call it Indigenous Resilience Day, right? Maybe instead of calling it Thanksgiving, we call it, harvest, right? If we don't want to make it too much about the natives, because, white people, right? Maybe we celebrate it in a different terminology. Yet we should be celebrating the understanding that generosity of spirit was met with violence. And we should be not celebrating that, but we should be in our celebration understanding that generosity of spirit is met with violence. And that's what Thanksgiving is. Okay. And we should be understanding that celebrating a harvest, celebrating abundance, right, needs to also be met with or done in a way where it is accountable, right? And done in a way where it is giving back to others. When you are grateful, when you have gratitude, right? This is an important thing. I never go to my altar and talk to my ancestors asking. I always go with gratitude. I don't ask for things, I thank for things, right? Having gratitude is an important thing. It's an important thing for your soul. It's an important thing for the world around you. So having a day where we celebrate gratitude is a huge thing. Gratitude for abundance, gratitude for, overcoming strife. Yet we have to understand that the overcoming of strife was not the pilgrims overcoming strife. The overcoming strife was indigenous people's resilience against annihilation attempts, right? if we can shift our understanding of what today actually means and shift our understanding of how we celebrate it, how we move forward with it, and how we work with it, then we can do this in a way that is, by everybody's account, morally and ethically sound, right? Because even the European moral and ethics states that gratitude is a positive, right? And that killing people is negative. So if we can shift this into the idea and the thought process of care for others, we can shift it into an idea and a thought process of harvest. And if we can acknowledge what actually happened to start this celebration day, what actually happened to start this holiday, and use that as a way to give back, to show that reciprocity of spirit to the people who deserve that reciprocity of spirit because their reciprocity of spirit was met with trauma, and to, in our gratitude for the harvest, in our gratitude for the peoples, in our gratitude for the understanding, as well mourn what was done, right? As well honor the memory of those who were harmed. Because as long as we focus as this is just a day that the indigenous people were so generous to us, and so United States, it takes time to be grateful when we're not even being grateful to the indigenous people who were generous of spirit, and we're not acknowledging what happened truly, what we're doing is harm. But if we can shift it as the United States into an understanding of returning that generosity of spirit, reciprocity of that generosity of spirit, and the truth of what happened, and how to use that generosity of spirit and reciprocity of spirit to uh, be accountable for this tragedy and uplift those who are the descendants of that tragedy, right? Uplift the descendants who are still struggling to have recognition in many cases, right? So I've gone on for about 30 minutes and we're down to about 100 people. And most of you seem to have been here for a second. I'm going to go ahead and turn comments back on. I like them better when they're on as long as it doesn't become nasty. I still don't think I have, well, actually, I do have a couple of mods in here now that I've seen walk in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn them back on. If it gets nasty again, I am going to turn them off. If you are a mod in here, I know I saw one person come in, but can you please say hey so that I know that you're in here as a mod? Let me go ahead and turn these back on. Today, I want this to be much more about ideas and questions than it is about me educating, right? Hey, Pickle. Okay, cool. So I do have a couple mods in here. So hopefully we can keep it back on for a little bit, right? So that we're not losing it, because very much today, what I want to be able to do is make this a space where we can share ideas, make this a space where, I know that I always have people who are of many of these nations who are in here. I would love to have people come up and tell us, tell Europeans, tell those who need to know these things, right? What is So every Indigenous person is going to look at today differently. Every single one of them is going to celebrate it in a different way or not celebrate it in a different way. And every group, because nobody is monothought, nobody, right? Every group is going to have different thought processes of how to make this positive, how they would like to see this move forward. And I'm Indigenous. That doesn't mean that my thought processes should trump other people's thought processes, right? Hi, Wagon Burner. So if there are people who would like to come up and who are Indigenous, who would like to talk about for them what this means and how they celebrate it or how they would like to see it celebrated, everybody is more than welcome to, as long as, of course, you, like I said, are Indigenous. And I would like to see from those of us who have mixed ancestry, or for those who are of European descent, or those who are, trying to decolonize, or those who are trying to work this a little bit differently, questions, comments, thought processes. Today is about coming together in a thought process to try and make some change, to try and affect a positive, right? I did see, and not the one at Macy's, the Macy's parade. Oh my gosh, no, I don't watch TV. Like I watch streaming stuff, but I don't watch TV, right? Um, uh, so it is definitely about one of those things where I want to, have. Oh, Grease Monkey, you're so cute in your little fucking gray beard, and you think that you're the top dog in any situation. You're not. I outwar you any day of the week. Like I have fun with that thought process that you think you're so great because really you're only stating it so loudly because you know that you're not, right? We don't scream shit to the top of the lungs unless we really know that we're not, right? Yes, Janice. The red hand on your face, that is MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Currently, we are missing 26% per capita Indigenous women a year. And we are the lowest population in the United States, Indigenous people are. We have 26% per capita that go missing. And when you wear this red handprint on your face, this should only be reserved for awareness of what we are going through. It's not something that you use for art. It's about awareness, right? It's about ensuring that our women stop dying, right? Absolutely. Yeah, unless you're indigenous, you should not be using the word Indian. And indigenous people can use the word Indian, but you should not be using it, right? And this is it is a global issue, right? Here in the United States, we're celebrating it as if we have this like great big thing. And most of the world looks at the United States and doesn't see the trauma, right? Now, that doesn't mean that most of the world thinks the United States is positive because most of the world thinks the United States is an idiot. Yeah, most of the world does not look the calls. So you were supporting MMIW. If you had put it in that you were supporting MMIW, most people aren't going to uh, be upset about that, right? So if you're sitting there, um, and if you're doing a video, say, and you have the red handprint and you put MMIW, most people aren't going to be upset about that, as long as they can recognize that what you're doing is raising awareness. They may not have recognized that what you were doing is raising awareness if you were attempting to raise awareness. And so in that case, I would tell you that please continue to raise awareness. And if somebody asks you again or states something, and the next time state, I know exactly what it's for, and I'm trying to raise awareness. And if you state that to most people, they're not going to be shitty about that. They're going to look at that as an act of an accomplice, right? Most people would rather watch the Kardashians and find out the horrific history we have, right? There are Turtle Island Indigenous people who use the word Indian. It was used for so many years that many of the older generations, that's what they know themselves as. And that's okay. They can call themselves what they want, right? They can refer to themselves as they want to. If you're not Indigenous, most people would prefer you don't use the word Indian because, um, but, if you I mean, you can't fault somebody for titling themselves something. This is that reclamation that we see. It's like, many black people who use the N-word, but somebody who's not black shouldn't be using the N-word, right? Um, it is that reclamation of problem issues, right? Though it is an understanding that those in Turtle Island who are indigenous and those from India who are Indian are a totally different thing, right? So there is a contention on where the term comes from. There is thought process that it actually comes from Columbus calling the Taino people the people of God, the children of God, Los de los Indios. India was not called India at the time. There was the Indus River in India, but it was Hindustan. It was not India. And so it's not like he thought that they were from India, right? And he actually describes them as looking like people from I think the Canary Islands. I can't remember, but one of the islands near India, and not as being Indian, right? Hey, Anthony. So uh, there is understanding in many indigenous circles that that actually might come from something different. It might come from being called the children of God instead of being described as being from India. Still, there are many people who would prefer it not be used. It is, of course, a legal term for who Turtle Island Indigenous people are. Yet, it's also one of the Hindustan, not Hindustan, Hindustan. Um, so there is legality within that term within the United States. American Indian is a legal term within the United States, right? Somebody who is a detribalized person is not American Indian, though they are indigenous, right? Because it is a legal term, right? So again, it's one of those things that if you belong to that culture, if you want to utilize that verbiage, you're more than welcome to. Nobody should tell you differently. Yet most people would prefer those who do not belong to that culture to not use that term anymore, mainly because of the fact that we are trying to create an understanding and trying to create a shift of thought, right? Honestly, God is a dog. I like that name. Agreed. And I think that most people, I think European American is a much better term. And I think personally for me, white is not it's not a I mean, like, white is a culture, especially here in the United States. But white is not an ethnicity. It's not a people, like, because European means, England and Spain and Poland, right? European is so many different people, some who have absolutely no genetic connection to each other. Same thing with white, right? Same thing with black, though black in America is an entirely different thing because black in America is descendancy from slave trade. And therefore it is an entire culture in and of itself. White in America is not well, I mean, it creates its own culture, and there's some, I do believe that white is a culture. I think that white is a culture more than like, I think that you can be not white, but be European America, because to me, white is a culture of plasticity and exploitation, right? And so I do believe, you know, oh, Damon, you're so cute with your attempted insult. I'm never alone. I have a big, loving family, and I'm never alone. If you're alone today, um, I'm sorry that you might feel lonely. Maybe reach out to people and try and understand on a deeper level, and up your ethics and morals, and be a better human being about it, right? And maybe you won't be alone. Um, but I'm not alone. I'm very rarely alone, right? Well, and that's what I said. White is a culture. To me, white is a culture. Yes, many people will say that white isn't a culture. White is a culture. White is a culture of plasticity and exploitation. But you can be white of skin and not be white of culture. You can have European genetics and be a European American, or be an Irish American, or be a fucking French American, right? You can absolutely be of European descent and not be a white American, because white American is a culture in and of itself. It's a culture of plasticity and exploitation, right? Absolutely. And I mean, lots of people say that white isn't a culture. I disagree. I think that white is a culture. It is not every European American is white. It is a culture of plasticity and exploitability, or exploitation, right? So, oh, yeah, I don't want the alien stuff. Take it there. Well, and eugenics was formed by Europeans and Americans, by the Europeans within America, right? And eugenics was used by Hitler, and Hitler came to us to get our racism, just like South Africa came to us to get our racism, because the United States does racism the best. Like, it's one of the things the United States is number one at, is their racism. And because of that, Yahtzee Germany came to us to get the information, and apartheid in South Africa came to us to get the information and to learn how to do it. And that's why South African apartheid was completely divided by color and had basically concentration camps where they could literally bomb entire groups of people. And why Yahtzee Germany had concentration camps, because they took the reservations and they immolated the reservations and the residential schools, right? So, absolutely, we see that Yahtzee Germany got that from us, and South of Africa got that from us, right? Castro may have trained in South Africa. I don't know. Heat, I didn't hear your question or see it. I didn't hear your question or see it. I think the people in the United States that claim to be white and look at just being white, like they don't look deeper into their culture, that's where the problem lies. What do I mean by exploitation? We live in a society that everything is based on how you're exploitable. Like, um, how much money do you earn is like one of the first things that we ask people, which is really how much is somebody exploiting out of you, or how much are you able to exploit other people? Um, if you are trading away entire control over you to somebody for less than a livable thought process and you don't get to set the value of your labor, then you're being exploited. If you are in a relationship with somebody who expects you to actually, your only reason for being in the relationship with them is so that you can provide a home or a roof, that's being exploited. When we belong to somebody, as in they control us and they own us, that's really being exploited. I didn't say it wasn't a universal thing. It absolutely is. It is really the foundation of the culture here, though, and it is the foundation of white, right? The white culture foundation, right? Is whether or not you're being exploitable, whether or not you can be exploited anymore, right? Whether or not you're able to provide an exploitable base for other people. And at the point that you can no longer be exploitable, you become houseless and become one of those others that we're all against, right? So I'm not a Democrat. Blue and red, right and left, they're all the same fucking bird and they're all out to kill you. I'm gonna burn it to the ground. I don't vote. I don't participate in this government. This government is an invasive government. It's a fuck, what is the word I'm looking for? I drop words. It is an occupying government, and I have no partaking in it. I am an absolute burn it to the ground person. I don't believe in a stratified society. I think stratification is a part of the problem. And I actually, through archaeology and anthropology, which I document on my website that you can find in my profile, have sources for, can prove to you when we start that exploitation base, and it is about 10,000 years ago, and that we start violence at the same time, and we use othering and stratification all together. And altogether, those are the things that are killing you today and why you can't, you're struggling, why we're all struggling, right? Well, there are, 10 or 12 people in the world who are actually, able to live high on the hog and everybody else is starving, right? So, no, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm not right or left. You don't get far enough left for me in this country. I am not a participant in this occupation government at all. I am a burn it to the ground person. So you can decide that I'm a Democrat because you don't like what I'm saying. Everything I'm saying, though, is backed up by facts. I do back it all up, right? And, well, you should leave and go back to where you came from because I'm Turtle Island Indigenous and I've been here for 50,000 years and you have not. So if you think that it's appropriate to leave when something is sick or something is failing, would you leave your wife because she had cancer? Like when you think it's appropriate to leave because something is problematic, that again is another issue, right? That's an entirely different issue. People don't leave a problem, they fix a problem. And your idea that people should leave if they disagree is really you just trying to stay in control of the narrative, is really you just trying to shut people up because you know that truth is being spoken and you can't handle truth being spoken. You can't handle it. It scares the shit out of you and you're a coward. So take it with you, right? I think that everything we have, I am Indigenous. I am Indigenous to Turtle Island. I'm Indigenous to many spaces, but to Turtle Island as well. Um, there was a question and I got distracted. What do I think about socialism? Um, Communism, socialism, these are not true communism and socialism that we've experienced so far. The communism and socialism that we've seen is not true communism and socialism. They are both based on capital. What we have seen is two spaces, or spaces who use stratification. Still, even though communism states that you shouldn't be using stratification, they have leaders who maintain power, you know, uh, who cause harm, right? And True communism means everybody's fed. That's what communism is. That's what communal base is, right? And the last time that we've really seen true communism was before 1492, right? Many spaces within Turtle Island were very communist based, like not Marxist communism, but communal based, right? And so we absolutely have not seen communism uh, not since 1492. We haven't seen communism. What we have seen is somebody exploiting Marx's words to create a power base, right? No communism has a stratified society. So you cannot have stratification and communism in the same space. You cannot have leaders and communism in the same space because that isn't true communism. True communal base does not have leaders. Every voice matters. Every voice matters equally. And well, professors will tell you that civilization starts when there's the ability to have food, like where there's an abundance of food. I disagree. I think civilization starts when everybody in your society is fed. When everybody in your society is fed and there might be some left over, that's civilization. When nobody is an orphan because everybody who's lost their parents is taken into the community and loved. When nobody is an abandoned elder because elders have a space. That's true community, and you can't have that without you can't have that without having everybody having an equal voice. You can only have that in a non-stratified society. Any space that's a stratified society is not true socialism or communism, right? It is capitalism disguised by a new name. And that's what we've seen, right? So with that, yeah, no, it doesn't work like that. I personally think that true communal based society is the way to go. I do not think it's something that we have seen in a long time. And so I do not think it is something that you can go, well, China had communism and they fucked up, or what was it? Korea had communism and they fucked up, or Venezuela has communism and they fucked up. um, they don't have communism. What they have is capitalism that they're calling communism. True communal based living, nobody's above and nobody's below, and everybody is together. Burger, don't talk to my mods like that. Burger, don't talk to my mods like that. You want to talk to my mods like that, you can go somewhere else. Um, Western thought does not give the sense of personal responsibility in order to engage in community. Yes, yet there are many people who do not follow Western thought who are across the globe who do have a true sense of community. Okay, this is where land back becomes important. When we talk about land back is about returning tending and governance to indigenous people on a global scale. And so when you have people who understand reciprocity and understand rights come with responsibilities and understand that stratified society is a problem and understand true communal base and their governance is given to spaces, then we can return to that understanding. There are many people alive today who understand that. There are many communities alive today that actually work within that. They're just indigenous communities, and many of us don't know of them, right? Um, it's still there. It's just hidden, like so many other things, trying to keep it silence for you, trying to make sure that you don't know, trying to keep you in check, because it's really all about trying to keep you in check. Everything that you're indoctrinated into, everything that you're taught, it's all about keeping you in check. The reason that you hate your neighbor or the person who's black or the person who's white or the person who's brown or the Muslim or the Christian or the Jew, the reason that you hate is because somebody's keeping you in check, because somebody's maintaining their power over you and wants to make sure that you can't overthrow their ability to hoard, their ability to maintain power, right? So there is absolutely communal based communities still out there, right? There's absolutely the knowledge still out there, right? It is just that we have to look to that knowledge. We have to talk to that knowledge. We have to understand that knowledge. And so again, you can be proud to be an exploitative, harmful human being. Go right ahead, do it elsewhere. Proud to be white is being proud of your skin color and your privilege and your advantage. It's not proud of your history. It's not proud of your ancestry. It's not proud of your accomplishments. It's not proud of anything. other than the ability that you can exploit other people, other than the ability that you have the ability to have privilege and can take advantage of others. That's the only thing that you're proud of when you're proud to be white. And you can go ahead and be proud to be a nasty human being. There's a lot of you out there who are proud to be nasty human beings. Take your lack of morals and your lack of ethics and your lack of care of others and your lack of sense of community and your lack of compassion and your lack of empathy and you're full of hate somewhere else and let the government control you there. Not in my life. You like being exploited. You like having privilege. You like being a shitty human being. You like watching children die. Do it elsewhere. That means that you're not necessary here. Your worth has gone down, right? Everybody is worthy just by breathing. Yet if you are actively out there trying to harm other people, your worth goes down, right? Yeah, what are you proud of? Being proud of being Black in the United States is about being proud that your ancestors were resilient enough for you to be around, right? It's about being proud that you have overcome all the stacks against you, that your skin has set several different stacks against you, and you are resilient enough to have overcome that, and that your ancestors were resilient enough to overcome that. The heroism in your ancestors. That's what it is about being proud to be Black. Being proud to be Indigenous or being proud to be red or being proud to be brown is about being proud of the fact that your ancestors were resilient enough, heroic enough, strong enough for you to be alive, and the fact that you have fought for however long you've been on this planet to be recognized as another human being to start with and to not be harmed, right? That is about that is absolutely something to be proud of. That is to being proud of your resilience. If you're proud to be white, you're proud that you have privilege and you're proud that you exploit people and you're proud that, you know, children die because of your actions. That's not something to be proud of. That's just not something to be proud of. If you want to, go right along. That's not your race. Race doesn't exist. What's your culture? What's your ethnicity? What's your ancestry? Be proud that you're Irish. Be proud that you're Irish American. Be proud that you're French American. Be proud that you're Spanish American, right? Be proud of your ancestry. Don't be proud of privilege. Don't be proud that you're able to harm others. Absolutely, Riles. So, absolutely. And if you want to do that, scroll on, find somewhere else to be proud about it. Yeah. And it's so mixed that I'm proud of, my Celtic ancestors were colonized too. And I'm proud of the resilience of my Celtic ancestors. I'm not proud that I have white skin. I'm proud that I have Celtic ancestry. I'm proud that I have Sami ancestry. Sami people are light of skin. But I'm proud that I have Sami ancestry, right? I'm not proud that I have light skin, right? It's weird. It's weird. So, and that is something that a lot of people have a problem with understanding. Nobody, when they're talking about land back, that I have talked to, and I have friends from Indigenous groups across the globe. I have family in Indigenous groups across the globe. I know people in pretty much every single one of the 500 nations that are federally recognized. I have family in nations. I have family in detribalized spaces. Nobody I know of who talks about land back is looking at it from the European standpoint of kick people out. That's a European thought process. There's no generosity of spirit. There's no reciprocity. There's no responsibility within that, right? That is a European thought process that if I don't like it, I kill it. Okay. That is a colonizer thought process. So most people who are, in fact, and I want to say most people just because of the fact that I know that just because everybody I've come in contact with believes a certain way does not mean everybody on this planet. That's just not how world works, right? But everybody that I've talked to and most people that I know or everybody that I know would tell you that land back is not about leave. Land back is about I belong to this space and I know how to take care of it and you're harming it. Okay? I belong to this space and I know how to make sure everybody is fed in this space and everybody is taken care of in this space, and you don't. So maybe if you can let me show you, we can reach a better space. I belong to this space, and she's screaming because you're hurting her, and I would like you to stop hurting her. That's what land back is. That's what returning of tending and governance is. It isn't get the fuck out, right? It's not what that is, right? So when we are, yeah, well, and it's tending and governance, right? So instead of having a colonizing governance, having an indigenous governance. Instead of being in an occupied government, being in an indigenous government, right? Which again, for the most part, when it comes to indigenous thought process in Turtle Island, at least, most indigenous, and again, most, I'm not saying all, but most indigenous thought process within Turtle Island is about ensuring entire communities are taken care of, right? It's not about ensuring that you yourself are taken care of. It's about ensuring that everybody else is taken care of. It's about the responsibilities that come with rights in most indigenous thought process. And again, I'm not in all, because well, whether or not I've met people that have different thought processes doesn't mean that they're not out there, right? So uh, so we didn't start being violent until 10,000 years ago. We're 290,000 years on this planet before we start being violent. We start being violent at 10,000 years ago. And we start being violent when we shift this understanding of belonging to the land to the idea that the land can belong to us. When we start thinking that we can control the land and that we control the animals and we can control the people, and stop seeing ourselves as a part of the biome, but start seeing ourselves as set above the biome and therefore in control of the biome, we start seeing violence. And we start seeing that along a few other lines, right? At the same time, we start to see the rise of stratification and agriculture based cities. We start to see people hoarding wealth and convincing you that it's your neighbors that you need to be aware of instead of the people who are hoarding wealth for you, right? Or from you, taking from you. And so all of this stuff really intertwines. If I can convince you that your neighbor is the one that's stealing from you instead of me, then I can keep you and your neighbor in check because you'll never unite to overthrow me. And I can make sure that you feed my hoarding addiction. Okay. And then I can convince you to be violent against other people so that you can continue to feed my hoarding addiction. And that is where we see the rise of violence of 10,000 years ago. We don't see violence in our species or in other species prior to that. We don't see, I mean, I guess maybe the first acts we see, like around that time frame, maybe it's 100 years earlier, things like that, but it's all roughly at the same period of time, and it all does this, it's all along the same thought process, right? It all works in the same thing. Stratified society, the land belongs to me instead of I belong to the land, and once I can control the land, I can control the animals, I can control the people, and I'm a step above. I'm not a part of, I own it, I control it, it's mine, instead of we're together, right? We think of this when we think of marriage today. Like that's your wife, that's your husband, and you get to control what your wife or your husband does, right? When we start to think of the ability to be able to control things around us instead of only being able to control ourselves, right? And when we stop seeing that it's an interaction, it's not me controlling all of this, it's a two-way street, and it can only work if it's a two-way street, right? Life only works if it's a give and a take. Life only works when there is responsibility, reciprocity, right? It only really works and it's only really healthy when we can see that we're not, everybody knows that people who think that, like, we know that narcissistic personality disorder is thinking that you're more important than everybody else and therefore everybody else owes you, and you don't think about, you have no empathy or compassion for what they're going on, right? So if we're looking at this, we can see that we already know that not taking responsibility for others or thinking that you're too important is a problem. We already know that. We're taught that. And yet we have been gaslight to think that it only applies to human. That fallacy of understanding only applies when you're dealing with other humans. It doesn't apply when you're dealing with the land. It doesn't apply when you're dealing with the animals, right? We have been indoctrinated. We've been gaslit into this idea that these are positive interactions with nature, and yet they're not. And we know they're not. We know they're not. People will tell you humanity's only reason for being is to reproduce and to devour the planet, right? People will tell you that humanity's purpose on this planet, it doesn't have a purpose, it's just here to take. People will tell you that. Religions preach that, right? And yet, we all understand that positive interactions are necessary, that reciprocity is necessary. We all understand that give and take is a positive thing. And yet, we are also all gaslit and indoctrinated into this thought process that it only applies on certain things. It doesn't apply to anything else. Right? We scientifically know that every species on this planet fulfills a niche of this planet. The trees provide oxygen, the ants clean, the beavers help the rivers flow right. We all know these things scientifically. We're all taught these things, and yet we're gaslit into this idea that that's everybody but us. Everybody but us fulfills a niche on this planet. We don't. Right. And if we're gaslit into this thought process that everybody fulfills a niche except for us, and that our reason is to propagate, and we are really taught that our reason is to have children, not raise them, not nurture them, not ensure that the next generation is healthy, not ensure that the next generation survives, but pump, 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 dump, and walk away. That's it. We just need to fuck and walk away because we've laid our seed and we've plowed that field, right? We get this thought process and this indoctrination that tells us two separate things and gaslights us the whole fucking time. Yet if we think, if we use the brain that the good gods gave us, as I used to tell my children, use the brain that the good gods gave you. If you use the brain that the good gods gave you, you see that these two things, they don't work together, that one is obviously a lie and one obviously feels right. Right? One obviously works and one obviously doesn't. One obviously is a truth and one is obviously a lie. And yet, we still remain in this gaslit sense that no, that's not it. You're thankful for slaughtering children, Tyler. Have fun with that. Be thankful that you and your ancestors kill kids. That's such an amazing person to be thankful that you and your ancestors kill kids. Some of them, yes. Some of them, yes. Some of my ancestors were colonizers. I mean, that's pretty obvious. As a mixed person, and I tell people this all the time because people are like, how do you deal with having competing ancestry, right? How do you deal with being very intersectional? How do you deal with the fact that half of your ancestors harmed the other half of your ancestors? I uplift the harm and get rid of the thought process of these, right? So my colonialist grandfathers who raped my indigenous grandmothers or Black grandmothers, or in sometimes cases, obviously white grandmothers, right? Those grandfathers, I don't uphold their thought processes, that Western thought process. I uphold the indigenous thought process that is healthier, right? So how do you deal with being intersectional? How do you deal with having a competing ancestry, right? I mean, I acknowledge it, obviously. I mean, it's very obvious that I have European ancestry, right? Though, there are indigenous Europeans who are light, right? You can be Sami and be this white, right? So I acknowledge and understand that I have colonial ancestors, right? Colonists for ancestries, right? I don't uphold that colonist thought process. I try and overthrow that colonist thought process, and I uphold the indigenous thought process. Right? You can absolutely be intersectional and have mixed space, right? And actually part of the healing is acknowledging that part of your ancestry did that, right? So that you can uplift the other ancestors who were harmed. Part of healing and accountability, right, is being accountable for the negatives that your ancestry did and trying to reinforce the positives that your ancestor did, right? I need to marry something. That's so cute. I'd like you to tell me, Banana Republic, who indigenous people colonized outside of the Aztec and the Maya, who were cousins. Tell me which indigenous people colonized. Coco, are you talking to me? Because I'm not a victim. I've studied the history and the archaeology of it extensively, so I have understanding of what happened, right? And again, the history of it I've studied through Black and Indigenous voices, through my ancestors, right? Not through settler voices, not through colonialist voices, right? So I have a broader understanding. That doesn't mean that I have all the knowledge. I know that I don't have all the knowledge. I don't want to have all the knowledge, right? Um, yet it's absolutely one of those things where I do have some understanding of it because I've spent decades studying it, right? Caste, that's one thing that a lot of people actually use it for. And a lot of indigenous people that I know actually use it for that, right? They use this day as a day where they can either use a day of mourning or they can use a day of feasting, right? Um, and there's a lot of importance to that, right? And that's what we were talking about in the beginning. There are ways that we can translate how this day is celebrated or how this day is interacted with so that there is acknowledgement, so that there is an understanding, and so that it's not a gaslight, right? So it's not about gaslighting thought process, right? So, if we can acknowledge the massacre that happened to create the first Thanksgiving, and the reason that the colonialists actually celebrated that's not true, Banana. It's just not true. That is European thought process that has been imposed on other people and written as other people did that, right? That's not just how it goes, right? I don't claim finite. I say I have a lot of knowledge on it. Knowledge is never ending. We're always learning new things. Everybody should always be learning new things, right? Everybody should always be learning new things. It depends. I'm usually only 1 second. Usually, I only take people that I actually have some knowledge of just because of the fact that I try and keep this a pretty safe space. Um, Yet, absolutely. If you would like to come up, as I was saying earlier, I think that it's important that we have you know, that indigenous people besides myself are able to lead this thought process as well, right? That we should be It should be one of those things where we are, there's never a singular thought process. And so if you'd like to come up, um, I don't recognize you, though I think we're now friends. But I'm absolutely more than welcoming, and you're more than welcome to come up. I don't usually take people up on a panel. I don't usually have people come up, but absolutely today, because this is not just a discussion for me, right? It's not just something that I can tell people, and it's not just my ideas that matter on it.
Hello, host. How are you doing?
Hello, good yourself?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm glad that this topic is coming up. It's the same thing with like Columbus Day and people celebrating genocide and all that stuff. Are you American or Canadian?
I'm a United States citizen. I wouldn't consider myself American, but I'm a United States citizen.
Yeah, I live in so-called Canada, so I guess that's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm indigenous. I'm indigenous as well, and there's a whole movement going on, and people are waking up to the lies that we've been told about everything. Um, there's some really great people out there to follow. Like Russell Means was a good. He talked about that. He talked um, about how it's just washed over in terms of just colonized and it's almost like what's that term they use um, manifest destiny, and that's the type of stuff that I deal with is that like policy still in place today, like the Indian Act still rules over us here in so-called Canada. It's the most patriarchal system, and it's like we still need a card to prove who we are. And the case law, the Canadian common law case law also says that. The crazy thing is that us up here in Canada, we have to prove in court about who we are and how we are attached to the land. Like there's petroglyphs in my traditional territory that are older than some countries, and it's just absolutely ridiculous that more people aren't waking up to it. I'm glad more and more every day are waking up to this and realizing that the system was built to like mentally enslave not only Indigenous people but the first settlers and people that came over as well. And that's just something that needs to be talked about more and understood more. But people have to get past that stuff that they were taught, as children, and that's probably one of the biggest, stumbling blocks to get across of. But I just thank you for your platform, and really, that's kind of really all I wanted to say. Thank you so much. I'll throw you a follow.
I followed you back. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you, kind of, sort of. And I appreciate that. I do think that that is actually one of the things that's really important. And it's one of the things that I try and talk about in here often is the fact that we're all indoctrinated into a thought process that is not real. And if we can see that indoctrination and start to see a truth behind it, and start to I term it as decolonize our thinking or de-indoctrinate our thinking, right? Because all of this is a colonization indoctrination. If they can control the way we think and they can convince us that it's something, then they can maintain control over us. And so I do think understanding the true histories of what is going on, or the true, well, history for me is a problematic. Written history is a problematic. I know a lot of it. I've read a lot of it. I've studied a lot of it. Yet I was raised with indigenous oral tradition, and so for me, that's always been a lot more real, like a lot more knowledgeable. It actually is more factual than written history, and so we use the word history because we all know it as that. But understanding the truth behind what happened, the true stories behind what happened, what really happened, I think is extremely important, and it's really one of those things that we don't have. That we, especially in the United States, especially in Canada, um, and from what I understand, actually in Mexico as well, right? There is this indoctrination of thought process and this convincing that this is what happened when it's really this, and then we get this gaslighting in it. Like there's this Like, this is what happened and this is what happened. Believe that this happened. Don't believe that this happened, right? You know, this switch of what this means when this is, it becomes such a huge twist of thought that it is so hard for people to really grasp. And that's, you know, one of the things that I think is important as we're trying to, for me, it's about saving our species, right? It's about stopping our species destruction because we're killing ourselves off. And oh God, we're just also in pain because of what's going on. And so for me, it's really about that. And it's about understanding that if we can open our brain, because we've all got these beautiful brains that we were given, it's really about who, you know, it's really who we are as a species, is this brain that gives us the ability to go from Homo erectus creating fire to having a cell phone. Um, if we can realize that knowledge is always a positive, that the more you know, the better, right? That the more that you can understand, the better. More truth that you know, the better. The more understanding that you have of it, the better. Then maybe we can find a way to move forward in a positive way, you know, and to come together in a positive way, right? I say frequently one of the reasons that I do what I do is because I was asked by family and many different groups and many different communities to teach allies and accomplices how to decolonize and to understand their ancestry without appropriating other culture. And so, you know, if I can help people, there are so many allies and accomplices out there, so many people who are of European descent who are trying to be a part of this movement towards decolonization and trying to be a part of, you know, returning to a healthier time. If I can teach them how to do it without appropriating and teach them how to open their mind and how to find information and how to find knowledge, then there is a huge step forward for all of us. Like I was saying probably 20 minutes ago, I don't know a single person who looks at land back as get out. Everybody that I know looks at land back as tending and governance, and people are welcome, right? It's about reciprocity, it's about community, it's about interaction with the environment in a positive way. It's not about get the fuck out, go. You know, it's about returning to a mindset, to a community, and returning to a mindset of positive interaction, right? I actually, I'm going to read something that I read a few times. Just because I think today and some of the conversations and the talk that we've just had, this is really, really important, right? Um, so this is this book, and you can access this book through the website that is my website that's in my profile, the inwitaor.com. You can find how to get to this book. This book is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a mother, scientist, decorated professor, and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Her first book, Gathering Moss, was awarded the John Burroughs Medal for Outstanding Nature Writing. Her writings have appeared in Orion, O Magazine, and numerous scientific journals. She lives in Bobias, New York, where she is Distinguished Teaching Professor of Environmental Biology and the founder and director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment. Now, grassroots profile picture is Turtle Island, right? And you've probably heard me state that this is Turtle Island. Abya is South America. Those are a singular phrase or thought process out of dozens. Like there's at least half a dozen phrases that I know that describe North, or that I've heard of that describe North America, and about half a dozen phrases that I've heard of from different nations that describe South America. Abya is the one that I have been able to verbalize. I don't like speaking indigenous languages when I can't speak them correctly. I'll mispronounce English all day. It's a bastardized language of 10 different languages. Indigenous language is important. And so I try not to mispronounce it. So I use Abya because I have learned how to pronounce it. And then Turtle Island is a good phrase, I feel, for North America, mainly because it's one that is, as it's translated, many people can understand it. And because of, I'm going to pin that one, Jedi, so that people can see this because this is important, maybe. Sleepy, can you pin Jedi's comment about landback.org? Because I can't seem to pin it. So this is one of the reasons that one of the nations that use the phrase Turtle Island call this Turtle Island. This is Sky Woman Falling, and this is the start of Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. In the winter, when the green earth lies resting beneath a blanket of snow, this is the time for storytelling. The storytellers begin by calling upon those who come before, who pass the stories down to us, for we are only messengers. In the beginning, there was Sky World. She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below. But in that emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled towards them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warm embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward, and so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather: loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle floated in their midst and offered her his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while, he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals, offered to help. Otter, beaver, and sturgeon, but the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. They returned gasping for air with their heads ringing. Some did not return at all. Soon only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative, and, before long, a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks, from the dab of mud on Turtle's back until the whole earth was made, not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts coupled with her deep gratitude. Together, they formed what we know of today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clenched in her hand. When she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits, and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals too have plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. Our stories say that of all the plants, wingosh, or sweetgrass, was the very first to grow on the earth. Its fragrance a sweet memory of Sky Woman's hands. Accordingly, this is Braiding Sweetgrass by Rabamal Kimmerer, and you can find it on my website is theinwit.org.com, and there's a tab that says books, and you can get it from there. It's not my book, but you can find access to it from there. Our stories say that of all the plants, wingosh, or sweetgrass, was the very first to grow on the earth. Its fragrance a sweet memory of Sky Woman's hand. Accordingly, it is honored as one of the 4 sacred plants of my people. Breathe in its scent, and you start to remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Our elders say that ceremonies are a way we remember to remember. And so sweetgrass is a powerful ceremonial plant cherished by many indigenous nations. It is also used to make beautiful baskets, both medicine. Did I hang them up? I did. I have earrings made of sweetgrass, actually. Beautiful baskets, both medicine and a relative. Its value is both material and spiritual. I'm not wearing my sweetgrass earrings today. There is such tenderness in braiding the hair of someone you love. Kindness and something more flow between the braider and the braided, the two connected by the cord of the plait. Wingosh waves and strands, long and shining like a woman's freshly washed hair. And so we say it is the flowing hair of Mother Earth. When we braid sweetgrass, we are braiding the hair of Mother Earth, showing her our loving attention, our care for her beauty and well being, in gratitude for all she has given us. Children hearing the Sky Woman's story from birth know in their bones the responsibility that flows between humans and the earth. The story of Sky Woman's journey is so rich and glittering it feels to me like a deep bowl of celestial blue from which I could drink again and again. It holds our beliefs, our history, our relatives, our relationships. Looking into that starry bowl, I see images swirling so fluidly that the past and the present become as one. Images of Sky Woman speak not just of where we came from, but also how we can go forward. I have Bruce King's portrait of Sky Woman, Moment in Flight, hanging in my lab. Floating to Earth with her handful of seeds and flowers, she looks down on my microscopes and data loggers. It might seem an odd juxtaposition, but to me she belongs there. As a writer, a scientist, and a carrier of Sky Woman's story, I sit at the feet of my elder teachers listening to their songs. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:35 a.m., I am usually in a lecture hall at the university, expounding how botany and ecology, expounding about botany and ecology, trying in short to explain to my students how Sky Woman's gardens, known as global ecosystems, function. One otherwise unremarkable morning, I gave the students in my general ecology class a survey. Among other things, they were asked to rate their understanding of the negative interactions between humans and the environment. Nearly every one of 200 students said confidently that humans and nature are a bad mix. These were third-year students who had selected a career in environmental protection, so the response was, in a way, not very surprising. They were well schooled in the mechanics of climate change, toxins in the land and water, and the crisis of habitat loss. Later in the survey, they were asked to rate their knowledge of positive interactions between people and land. The median response was none. I was stunned. How is it possible that in 20 years of education, they cannot think of any beneficial relationship between people and the environment? Perhaps the negative examples they see every day, brown fields, factory farms, suburban sprawl, trunciated their ability to see some good between humans and the earth. When we talked about this after class, I realized that they cannot even imagine what beneficial relationships between their species and others might look like. How can we begin to move towards ecological and cultural sustainability if we cannot even imagine what the path feels like? If we can't understand or imagine the generosity of geese? These students were not raised on the story of Sky Woman. On one side of the world were people whose relationship with the living world was shaped by Sky Woman, who created a garden for the well-being of all. On the other side was another woman with a garden and a tree. But for tasting its fruit, she was banished from the garden, and the gates clanged shut behind her. That mother of men was made to wander in the wilderness and earn her bread by the sweat of her brow, not by filling her mouth with the sweet, juicy fruits that bend the branches low. In order to eat, she was instructed to subdue the wilderness unto which she was cast. Same species, same earth, different stories. Like creation stories everywhere, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation to the world. They tell us who we are. We are inevitably shaped by them no matter how distant they may be from our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on the rough road to her real home in heaven. And when they meet, the offspring of Sky Woman and the children of Eve, and the land around us bears the scars of that meeting, the echoes of our stories. They say that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I can only imagine the conversation between Eve and Sky Woman. Sister, you got the short end of the stick. The Sky Woman story, shared by the original peoples throughout the Great Lakes, is a constant star in the constellation of teachings we call the original instructions. These are not instructions like commandments, though, or rules. Rather, they are like a compass. They provide an orientation, but not a map. And the work of living is creating that map for yourself. So I want to go back to this part where I'm telling you, where I'm reading, same species, same earth, different stories. Like creation stories everywhere, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation to the world. They tell us who we are. We are inevitably shaped by them, no matter how distant they may be from our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on a rough road to her real home in heaven. For me, when I'm talking to people about that 10,000 years ago shift in thought process that leads us to the point of violence and hoarding and stratification and all of these issues that we are dealing with today, braiding sweetgrass. And you can get this book. My website, in my profile, there is a link to get this book underneath the books tab on that website. Absolutely. Robin Wall Kimmerer is amazing. She is, you can also, like, you can go to the library and have her read this book to you. Like, this book is on your library apps. If you have a library app, you can check out the book and have it read to you by her, like she reads it. And she is a storyteller. You can hear that she is a storyteller in her words, right? I have not, but I can look for it. I have a few different books, but this one is actually because of a college course. That's how I found it, and I went, "Holy shit!" It actually saved my head for. I was taking a philosophy course at the same time I was taking an indigenous gardening course, and the philosophy course was about ethics, and it was all centered on God. And I was like, I can't handle this course, and so I would toss the shit across the room and pick up Robin Wall Kimmerer and go, "Oh." So um, this is that shift of understanding that comes right 10,000 years ago. This is that shift of understanding that shifts us from belonging to the biome to being a part of, to setting us above. Now, that shift of understanding that comes 10,000 years ago with that belonging to the land disappearing, and instead the land belongs to us. And once we can own the land and control the land, a living, breathing, viable being, and control the animals and control other human beings and start to hoard, right? That shift that sets us above the biome that comes at 10,000 years ago. This is a really good example of the differences in concept to me. Because when we look at that shift from being a co-creator, from being intermixed and intermeshed with the biome to having a niche that we fulfill in the biome, because our niche that we were created by the biome to fulfill is to tend, right? To care for the land, to care for the animals. Um, when we are having that shift of concept, it is that shift of concept that gives us the ability to harm other things, right? That gives us the ability to have holy wars, that gives us the ability to destroy, right? The idea that we're not a part of it, it's not our home, we're passing through this so we can get to something else, right? This shift of concept gets us to where we are. And that shift of concept, really, if we can shift back, and if you listen to science, if you listen to the facts that are put out there by any measure of facts, right? You can see why you would shift to this concept of being intertwined with the biome instead of believing that you're set above passing through on your way to your real home in heaven, right? So when we are looking at this concept and we can actually use our brains, right? Instead of sitting there going, well, I was taught this, and because I was taught this, this is the reality, right? So many people are taught that you should not search beyond. So many people are taught that the only book you should read is the Bible. So many people are taught that you shouldn't learn outside of school. So many people, and many people don't learn outside of school because school is such an indoctrinated thought process that for many people, like it turns off that desire to learn, right? So when we can shift from this concept of we were given the earth as something to destroy and shift into a concept that we were created by the biome as something to tend and take care of the biome, and that we have this intermix, thank you, love, and we have this intermix and reciprocity with the biome, right? That we have a space within the biome, that we have a niche within the biome. When we can shift that understanding, we can understand why we need to have that positive interaction. We can understand that we're not locusts. We can understand that we're not just put here to pump, pump, dump, and walk away. That this is not the 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 way to interact in a positive manner, right? And so that shift of concept, right, is a really great way to start decolonizing your brain or decolonizing the indoctrinated thinking that you're in, right? That shift into something new is really a great way to do it, right? Um, because that basic concept, that very base understanding of belonging to something, not only fulfills a need within us, right? Not only fulfills the disconnect and the pain that we're feeling, like not only heals that, right? It also heals the world around us and our interactions with the world around us, right? So it is a really amazing start to that understanding, right? Um, and there were a couple of things that we were talking about even before grassroots came up and I saw that their turtle was there. There was a couple of different things that we brought up that really pointed that to me, or that we were talking about that really pointed that to me, because we're talking about, being locusts and not being locusts, right? We're talking about the thought process that I won the war so I can kill people versus the thought process of I have responsibility to all of humanity and responsibility to the animals in the biome. Uh, and that just because you can attack or harm somebody doesn't mean you won jack shit, right? If we can shift that concept within us, that's a really, once you shift that concept, you start to see everything else, right? Once you can shift the concept that you're not set above to take from above, you can start to see all the places where the set above to take from are indoctrinated into our thought process, are a part of what we're taught, are a part of what we've been seeing. And once we can shift from that, I'm just set above, I'm going to make it to heaven, this is just for me to use and destroy, into a concept of reciprocity, into a concept of interaction on a positive level. Once we can get to that, we can move forward, right? We can, in that shift of our concept, start to shift our interactions, start to shift our understanding, and start to find a healthier interaction, right? And we're set up for competition. We're set up, so many people are taught that to find, you shouldn't go and study anymore, you know. And whether it's an actual verbal, only read your Bible because that's the whole truth, or school turning you against studying because, it gets so boring to be indoctrinated into thought processes that don't suit, that don't feel right, right? Um, there is this disconnect, especially in the United States. So I'm not going to say that it's not in other places because I know it is, but especially within the United States, that knowledge is not power. That knowledge is in fact something to shift away from, right? Hey, legal. Bro, no, I do not work. I'm a disabled war vet. This is my work, right? And I can't actually work for other people after what the military did for me or did to me. Like the pain that the military put me through means that I have no ability to allow somebody to exploit me anymore. Um, we should be setting our own price for the labor that we give, right? Whether that price is free, like I said it in here, or whether that price is $30 an hour, we should be setting our own price for the labor that we give. Instead, we are exploitable, and instead, we are being exploited. And instead, you value your worth based on something that has no worth. Money has no worth. It's a piece of paper that somebody printed, that they make up when they want to, that they print more of when they want to. Money has no solid worth in your life. And all the things that money buys that seem to have solid worth in your life these days, they can be taken from you by the government. The government can come in and take your house. The government can come in and take your children. The government can come in and take your car. The government can take anything from you at any time. It's written into the governmental structure, right? So, basing your worth on whether or not you are exploitable by other people isn't a healthy thing. And I don't base my worth on whether or not I'm exploitable. I actually have this antithesis. I can't. Like, I've tried to apply for jobs and I freeze. Like, I, I had this prospective job through a voc rehab where I did voc rehab to get my last degree. And they were like, hey, we want you to come and work for us. And the person who helped me through voc rehab, she's like, I'm leading this office and I want you to come and work for me. And then I found out that she wasn't placed in charge of that office yet. And they weren't sure if she was going to be the person in charge of that office. And I went, can't. Like, I sat for an hour and a half trying to amend my resume so that it was working for that job. And I like literally could not. And I've been stuck. Like, I went through classes on how to write resumes at 20. Like, I can tell you how to write your resume. I could not put words to paper because I froze. I cannot allow another person to be in control of my worth ever again. It is not okay. And will I understand that for many of us, we still have to, right? For many of us, we still have to, because the society is capitalistic based, right? We still have to enter into that space, right? The military did this to me, so the military can pay for it. The military made me to where I can't fucking do it, so the military gets to pay for it, right? So, um, and many don't. And if you have to go out there and be exploited by other people, I'm not holding harm for you. Like, I'm not sitting here going, how dare you? My partner has to work, right? I'm not saying, that anybody, should, you know, what I'm saying is that your worth is not valued on that. Your worth is valued somewhere else, right? That your worth is worth. It doesn't take somebody else deciding to pay you for you to be worthy. And that it is absolutely exploitation, right? And so we should not be looking at it as a positive. Now, that doesn't mean, and I know you do, I know you do, a Jedi. I just, I don't also want other people who don't know to think that I'm telling you you shouldn't survive. We should all survive, right? We're all worthy of surviving. We're all worthy of having a safe space and a roof over our head, right? We're all worthy of that. In fact, that's a part of the right to life, is having a safe space and a roof over our head, right? Um, and there are absolutely people out there who are running companies who absolutely are doing better, right? There's a lot of doing better, especially now after the pandemic, right? Um, I just want people to understand, especially people who are asking me whether or not I have a full time job, that my worth is not based on whether or not it can be exploited. My worth is based on something different. My worth is based on breathing. My worth is based on being alive. My worth is based on what I contribute to community, not what I do for another human being that I'm exploited out of, right? That sucks, Saba. I hate that shit. Um, Actually, I was 15 years out before, 12 years out before I got my disability. I tried before that, and because of the situation I was in, I couldn't speak. I wasn't able to advocate for myself. And not being able to advocate for yourself sometimes can be really problematic, especially because many disabled people have a hard time advocating for themselves, especially in a society that is very ableistic based, where we're all taught our worth is based on whether or not we're able to go to work, right? And so it becomes very problematic for people to be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to speak for themselves. You know, um, it's a hard thing, hard road to hoe, right? And I encourage you to keep trying. Oh, yeah. And I have CPTSD. I have MST PTSD as well. And between the two of them, that's really hard. Awesome. Did you celebrate the massacre of children spirited? Were you celebrating massacring children? Is that what you were going for? I mean, if you want to have a big meal today, real. But, if you want to Celebrate the massacre of children, real. If you're going to celebrate today, maybe you should find a different way to celebrate, right? Harvest feasts are beautiful things, right? Um, Holding space for mourning for what happened to cause this holiday. That's a beautiful thing. Holding space for understanding that great generosity was treated with great trauma. You know, that's a beautiful thing to do. Um, Celebrating killing children, though, might be morally and ethically wrong. I mean, I don't know what your morals and ethics are, but my morals and ethics state that killing children is a bad thing. Okay. I'm a drama queen. That's so cute, Marshall. I am always amazed by the different ways people think they can silence people. I'm always amazed by the different ways people think that they can silence people. I actually experienced in real time recently. I had a male family member in my life who was over, and we went north on a little trip, the two of us, and on the way back, they decided to play a weird gotcha game with me that was not working well. And they decided to use, well, you're getting emotional. Why are you getting emotional? I'm not emotional. I'm not calling you names. I'm not raising my voice up than the fact that you're deaf. I'm not emotional. There's no emotion here. I'm trying to explain to you that you don't know the way my mind works. You're telling me how I think, and I'm trying to explain to you that you don't know how I think. Um, and they're like, "Oh, you're just emotional. I can tell. Your voice is changing and your body language is changing. You're emotional." I'm like, "Why are you getting so emotional over this?" "Well, I'm not emotional. Your body language is changing." "Well, I'm not emotional." You might be emotional here." "I'm not emotional." "You are emotional here." Screaming eagle, I am not white. I am indigenous, though I'm obviously light of skin and I'm globally mixed. When we are looking at different ways to understand, right, different ways to move forward, different ways to actually, hold accountability for ancestry, different ways to ensure that people are being heard, different ways to ensure that what has been done can't be done again, right? When we're looking at today, and again, I think everybody has to do things in their own way, right? Everybody has to, find their own way through it. I think a start, though, is honoring those who were massacred, honoring those who gave and gave and gave and were harmed in that giving, right? Whose giving and love was met with harm, right? So I know many Indigenous people who feast today. They don't feast today as a Thanksgiving. They feast today as a, day of remembrance, feast because it's harvest time. Um, I don't think anybody's asking you not to feast today, right? I think people are asking you to not celebrate a massacre. And if you're going to feast today, to hold space for the knowledge of what actually happened, to hold space for the knowledge that generosity and giving was met with something else, right? So, personally, to me, I think that I think we just rename it, right? I think that we acknowledge what it truly is and have a harvest feast every year. Right? And during that harvest feast, acknowledge what happened to cause that first harvest feast, right? Or that first Thanksgiving. And utilize that time to uplift Indigenous groups who were harmed, or Indigenous groups as a whole within the United States and Canada, right? To uplift things to make it better. Well, we were talking earlier about the massacre that happened that Thanksgiving actually celebrates. Um, I want to say Pia Pot, but it might be Pequot. I can't remember off the top of my head. But there was a massacre, and the British colonialists massacred an entire nation, killed a bunch of women and children, and then went home and celebrated it, carrying their trophies of war home, right? And of course, we were taught in school differently. We're taught in school that the rest of the generosity of Indigenous people is what we're celebrating today. And we should absolutely celebrate the generosity of Indigenous people. We should absolutely. Oh, take your Islamophobia out of my chat. Uh, what is your discourse, Joey? This isn't a discussion forum. This is an educational platform. It's not a discussion forum, you know? Um, and crappy behavior absolutely gets muted. I set boundaries in the beginning of all of my lives. I mean, we're what, 2 hours in? I can reset my boundaries so that you know, since you came in later. Um, yes, but I don't think that you need to be involved in the discussion because you're not a part of the discussion. I've had Indigenous people up here. Are you Indigenous? Where do you come from? Who are you Indigenous to? This isn't a colonial space. This isn't a space where your white ass needs to be heard. It's not about you today. So, um, oh, I got distracted again. Oh, yes, boundaries. Let me go ahead and reset my boundaries, right? I can turn it off if it's getting bad. I know that. Ducray, are you the only one in here right now, Lovity? Oh no, we do have Jedi in here as well, and Saba's in here. Okay, and you, if you need to, I mean, if it's getting bad, please don't, don't fuck with your mental health. Um, so yeah, my family's been here for over 50,000 years, some of them at least, right? So my boundaries in my space. TikTok gives everybody with 1,000 followers a live space. This is what I use my live space for. I use my live space for education. My name is Witta. I am an archaeologist, an anthropologist, a historian, and a healer and a storyteller. I'm globally mixed Indigenous. That indigeneity includes to Turtle Island. I have degrees in healing and degrees in archaeology and anthropology. And I do not believe that education should be gatekept behind a $40,000 a year paywall. And so I use TikTok to give a base level education of information that I have. This is something that I do for free and something that I do just because I love people and I would like to be able to leave my house without being scared of y'all. I am a war vet, so I don't work. I'm disabled. So if you want to threaten with getting me fired, try it. Have fun with that. Um, in my space, I have boundaries, and the boundaries that I have in my space to create a healthy space and a safe space for everybody involved is I would appreciate it if you treat people with kindness in my space. Don't bring your racism in my space. Race has been debunked. It was a theory created by my field that's been debunked by my field. It was created to justify atrocity, and it has been debunked. It does not exist. It's a colonial construct. Of course, racism still exists. Many of us live in countries founded on racism, and culture and ethnicity absolutely exist. The race does not exist. So please don't bring your racism into my chat. I also appreciate it, or not appreciate, but set the boundary that you don't bring your phobias based on gender, desire, or religion into my chat. I also don't want your God in my chat. He's a narcissist. He's nasty, and I want nothing to do with him. I still don't want you being Islamophobic or anti Semitic within my chat. That's not an appropriate way to be for anybody. I also don't want your phobias based on gender or desire in my chat. There are 3 biological sexes: male, female, and intersex. Gender is a personal perception and it has nothing to do with what you think when it's somebody else's personal perception. And the same thing with desire. All of your thought processes based on it that are negative are based on your God, who's again a narcissist, a warmonger, and I don't want nothing to do with it. If you want to be a racist, if you want to be somebody who's phobic based on gender, desire, or religion, you can scroll on. This obviously isn't the place for you. If you think I'm incorrect, I don't think I know everything. I might be incorrect. There are ways to tell somebody that they're wrong. That's not correct, Witta. This is in fact correct. Here's a source. That's not correct, Witta. This is in fact the truth. Here's a source, right? So if you think I'm incorrect, please bring the thought process of what you think I'm incorrect about and a source that proves that you're right. So I can go ahead and look it up, right? So that I can go ahead and educate myself further, because we should all be educating ourselves further on every level every day. Okay. I don't deal with nasty in my chat. I am coming to you in an act of kindness. I'm coming to you in an act of love. And if you cannot bring it back to me, you can scroll on. Not every place is a place that you need to be. And if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. It's truly okay. You don't have to go out there trying to fuck with other people because they have differing opinions than yours. You can find another place and go and be with all the little like minds and all the little space that you can be fed back what you're preaching, right? More than welcome. But this is my space. TikTok gave it to me. I get to set the boundaries. I get to control the space. And if you don't like it, you can find somewhere else to be, right? So those are the boundaries in my space. And if you want to work within those boundaries, you're more than welcome to stay within my space. Piercings are global pre-colonization. Piercings go back to the Neanderthals, including nose piercings. And I'm not white. I'm just white presenting. But have fun with that thought process. Okay. So when we are looking at different ways to decolonize the brain and to, help with other groups' decolonization of their space, and looking at different ways to interact with a day that is founded on tragedy and is founded on trauma, there are a lot of different things that we can do. Again, that starting of decolonization of your brain is understanding a different concept of why we're here. Scientifically, we're here because of the fact that we're meant to tend the biome. We're meant to interact on a positive level with the biome. That's the scientific reason that Homo sapien evolved. Period. Like, go look some science up, you'll see it. The reason that we evolved is so that we can tend the biome, so that we can create a positive space within the biome. I'm not a victim. Though your concept that victim is a bad word is because you want to be able to blame the victim instead of blaming the person that perpetuated the act. You probably support Brock Turner too. You can take it elsewhere. Okay. So when we're looking at that, we can absolutely switch our concept of why we're here into a more scientific concept of why we're here, right? Our science tells us that the concept of why we're here is because we fulfill a niche in the biome like every other species, and the biome fulfills a niche. If we stop looking at the earth and stop looking at the biome as something that we can exploit, right? If we start looking at the biome as something that we're supposed to maintain, as something we're supposed to have positive interactions with, that foundation can lead to decolonizing the rest of your thought processes. That's a really good way to start when you're trying to decolonize your thought process, when you're trying to get rid of the indoctrination, right? Colonial lens is so hard to break down, right? So, weaponized, I'm a war vet. You can take it elsewhere. You don't get to come into my space and tell me shit like that. Step. So when you are trying to decolonize that space within your brain, that's a really great space to start. Not only is it factual and scientific, but it will absolutely give you a better interaction with the world around you. You can go out and sink your toes into the earth and feel it. You can absolutely feel by sinking your toes in the earth just how interconnected we are with the biome, just how much of a part that we have with the biome, right? Just how Europeans document when they get to Turtle Island, north to south, east to west, coast to coast, that Turtle Island is a garden. It's documented by every single European that comes through. When the Spanish arrive in California in the 1700s, they document California as a garden, right? So this entire space was a tended space, north to south, east to west. This entire space was a tended space. That interaction with the biome fed 100 million people. That interaction with the biome, an attending way, in a positive interaction with the biome, created cities, entire cities that were healthy, that did not have the disease that European cities had, that did not have filth, that had no children starving, that had no elders starving, right? So if we can understand that positive interaction with the biome that feeds everybody and ensures that everybody's interaction with the biome maintains health for society as a whole, then we can start shifting our thought process. It's a good base level to start shifting our thought process. Part of the food chain, not top of the food chain. That's a really good one, right? Um, so that's a really good start. And when we're looking at today, when we're looking at this celebration of children's death, because that is what today is, a celebration of a massacre, a celebration of the killing of children. When we can understand that that's what today is and have a shift of understanding of that, P quote. There we go. I knew that I wasn't pot and I wanted to make sure. So when we can understand that today is a celebration of the massacre of the Pequot people, when we can understand that that massacre is something that we've been celebrating since the 1630s, when we can conceptualize that it is not okay to celebrate the killing of children. I don't believe I have to explain that to people sometimes, right? How do I have to explain to you that it's not okay to celebrate killing kids? When we can understand that we are celebrating the killing of children today, right? When we can understand that we are celebrating a massacre today, and when we can shift that thought process, again, when you can shift the thought process within your mind from the biblical thought process that the world was given to us to destroy to the biological scientific thought process that we fulfill a niche within the biome, and the niche that we fulfill within the biome is the tending of the planet, the tending of the biome, the tending of environment. When we can shift from that biblical thought process to that thought process that we are part of the biome, that we are scientifically just another part of the biome, then we can start that process. When we can shift our understanding of the different things that the United States is feeding us, the different gaslights, the different lies, the different indoctrinations, then we can shift our understanding of how to interact with the people around us within the United States or Canada or Mexico as well. So, when we are taking this shift, it's important to understand that there are many people who still should be celebrating today as a day of harvest, a day of abundance, a day of family, a day of interaction. And it is perfectly acceptable to feast today. It is perfectly acceptable to enjoy abundance today. It is perfectly acceptable to take this to a positive place, right? To take your feast and your celebration to a positive spot, to instead of feasting in celebration that people were so kind before you killed them, feast in celebration of life, feast in celebration of abundance, feast in celebration of the fact that there are people out there whose resilience means they're still alive throughout the traumas that your ancestors may have inflicted upon them, right? So nobody's telling you to not eat today. Many people eat today. What I'm telling you is shift your understanding of what today means. Shift your understanding of what you should be celebrating today, right? Whether you take time to hold space to mourn the lives lost today, whether you take time to hold space for the beautiful resilience and the beautiful reciprocity and generosity of spirit of the indigenous people who were massacred and sacrificed by your ancestors to, their God, right? When you can take that and broaden your knowledge instead of believing in what you were indoctrinated into, right? That is healthy for yourself as well as everybody around you. If you want to do more, there are ways to do more, right? For most of us, there is every city, there's a local nation office, right? And across the country, there are ways to get hold of local nations, right? Maybe celebrate the resilience and celebrate the generosity and reciprocity of spirit and take food to people. Maybe you celebrate abundance and take food to people. Maybe and I don't mean in a white savior concept, right? I don't mean like, I know what you need and I'm going to do this. But, I can't, there's not a reservation on this planet that doesn't need water at this point, right? And most spaces are food deserts at this point, right? Have a great one, Nana. So when you can take this day and shift your understanding of it and shift the way that you're interacting with it. Nobody's asking you not to celebrate food. Nobody's asking you not to celebrate family. People are asking you to see what really happened today and not celebrate the massacre of children. Instead, find ways to interact on a positive level, right? Find ways to make this day about a healthy interaction. Whether we change the terminology that we use for it, whether we change the way that we interact with it, right? This is what there was something that I read within this that it really spoke to me as we're discussing Thanksgiving today, actually. And as we're discussing how to change that thought process, right? Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animal, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance. So if we look at this as a day of gratitude, right? Instead of a day of taking, right? Instead of a day of celebration of a massacre, if we look at this as a day of gratitude towards, towards resilience, towards the fact that we're looking at people who, no matter what was done to them, are still not out there trying to kill you, right? If we can take it as a gratitude for the gardens that Sky Woman created, if we can take it as a gratitude for the world around us, a gratitude for family, a gratitude for community, right? If we can shift that, thought process, it will be healthier for all of us, right? If we can take a look at it and understand the truth behind it, that itself is the start. If you can look at the story that you were told in school and see the fallacy within it and see the gaslight within it, right? And then you can understand what happened, that itself is the start. That itself is the start. It's not about bitterness. It really isn't. It's about shift of understanding. Burn it to the ground, Joey. Every step of the way, burn the whole fucking thing to the ground. Until we can burn it to the ground, though, we have to work on how we change our interaction with people. Right? Nobody's going to burn it to the ground tomorrow. And because we're not burning it to the ground tomorrow, we have to shift how we interact with it first. I can't convince 6 billion people to burn the fucking structure to the ground. I'm working on it. Haven't gotten there yet. If I can show you facts and can get you to look differently at the way the world is structured, get you to change your perspective, then we don't have to burn it to the ground, right? We can change it without burning it to the ground. And don't get me wrong, I'm still all for burning it to the ground. Yet if I can shift the thought process, we get further ahead. It's not about, you know, going imperial instead of capital. It's all the same thing. It's not about going fucking communist instead of capital. It's all the same fucking thing. It is about, if I can get you to understand the reality instead of what you've been indoctrinated into and gaslight into, then you can help shift the world. I can't get you to burn it down tomorrow. We've been trying. It's not working. Right? So if I can't get you to burn it down tomorrow because we've been trying and it's not working, right? If I can get you to understand that exploitation is not okay, that reciprocity is a positive thing, that generosity of spirit is a positive thing. If I can shift this concept for you and you can shift this concept for others, right? If we can shift it, then we're no longer worshiping money. Then we're no longer going from a monarchy to a presidential thing and it's the same fucking thing, right? Then we actually shift the structure instead of just calling it by a different name, because that's all we've been doing is just calling it by a different name. And so if I can show you that all we're doing is calling it by a different name. We had our own society here and you came in and destroyed it. I'm just trying to take it back. We had our own society that worked underneath these thought processes and you came in and destroyed it. And I'm just trying to bring it back, right? I'm just trying to get you to see what it was, right? So if I can get people to understand the truth and the reality that science teaches us, right? The truth and reality that is real, like the physical truth and reality, right? If I can get you and enough people to switch, then we don't go from a monarchy to a presidency. We stop capitalistic thought process and we move to communal based thought process and reciprocity of spirit, right? If I can get you to see that scientifically we fulfill a niche within the biome, right? If I can get you to understand that that niche within the biome has been taken from you and replaced with something that's not healthy for you or anyone else around you, if I can get enough people to de-indoctrinate the way they're thinking, then instead of burning it to the ground, we create something new out of it. Not something that's just a rebranded form of the last 10,000 years, but something that is older than that, something that we were, something that we still are in many spaces, that is about interaction on a positive level instead of what we're doing. And that's all it is. It's about trying to wake you up a little bit. It's about trying to de-indoctrinate you. It's about getting you to see that the government's not out to help you, it's out to kill you. It's about getting you to see that this is a problem. Yes, but what is our niche within the biome? Why were we speciated, gravity? Every animal and plant on this in this planet fulfills a space in the biome, right? Every plant and animal on this planet fulfills a space in the biome. Why do you think you're any different? We all fulfill a niche. We all have a purpose, an interaction with the biome that we speciated for, that the planet developed us for, that the planet formed us for, because we are all formed through adaptation to space, right? All species are formed through adaptation of space. That's what evolution is adapting to space. And if all species are formed through an adaptation to space, all species were formed by the biome to fulfill something within the biome. What is our fulfillment purpose within this biome? That's the real question. What do we do within the biome? Or are we just the children of Eve wandering through a wasteland that we can destroy until we get to our real place on heaven, which has no fact behind it, which has no evidence behind it, yet half of the world believes. And so, because they believe it, they set themselves above the biome and they kill the biome. That's scientifically impossible, gravity. That's scientifically impossible. That's scientifically impossible that we're just here for no fucking reason. Just literally scientifically impossible. That only works if you believe a deity created you. It's the only way that works. So you think that we just were created to do nothing? You think that we just speciated for no reason? That we have no purpose? And what Hannah's just said, colonization, actually, monocrop agriculture disrupts the resource cycles. Monocrop agriculture has disrupted the resource cycle since it started. So how did you speciate? What made you speciate into a human? How did you come into being? I mean, I don't believe in a like a deity creating us, right? I do believe that we speciated within the biome and that that speciation was guided by the biome's needs, right? Because that's why creatures speciate because they fulfill something that the biome needs. So why do you think you're here if the biome didn't speciate you? The biome didn't have a need for you to fulfill and adapted you to fulfill that need. Thank you so much, Hannah. I I hate mispronouncing names and it's so hard when you're just reading them, right? Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm doing a live. I see you're awake though. I'll go ahead and close out. I've been in for like 2.5 hours anyways. So I am going to go because my partner has woken up and I enjoy spending time with them. Um, at the end of all of my lives, Sleepy says, hey, at the end of all my lives, it does though. Okay, so do you think that the species, okay, so did trees speciate for no reason? Did animals speciate for no reason outside the animals that we controlled their speciation, right? Everything adapts, everything is created out of adapting to a biome, and that adaptation to the biome that creates the species is taking these things like I know that I can eat this product or I know that this product is herb, and all of those interactions actually tend the biome. Honorable harvest tends the biome, right? Honorable harvest is a method of tending within the biome, and we see that animals do this as well, right? You know, they only take little bits of plants instead of the whole fucking thing and strip it, right? With all of that stuff, that's about the biome um, adapting us to fulfill what the biome needs, right? It's about, you know, the fulfillment of a need. No, I mean, that's a continuation of a species, but it's not why a species comes into being. So this is what I study. Like this is the basis of everything I study. Why are we here and how did we get here? I have studied how we speciated in depth. right? And we just changed how we speciated this year. Like we just came into a new understanding of how we speciate. And yet, in all of this, this speciation is about how we adapt to the biome, right? Everything about you is an adaptation to the biome. Your ability to be expediently bipedal, I mean, I did college classes on evolutionary biology, and evolutionary biology tells us that we speciate through adaptation. Evolutionary biology says that every species in here speciates through adaptation. Adaptation in isolation is how you speciate. That's like literally the base level of biological evolution. Adaptation through adaptation in isolation. Recently, we learned that us and Homo erectus actually speciated through convergence. Take care. And I get it. I mean, it's not for everybody, right? Um, so I do this at the end of all of my lives. Because this is important to me. And this is one of the many reasons that I do this. As a species, we are biologically nurturing and communal. Why are we biologically communal? Biologically, I think so. Free speech is a pretty good one. Biologically, we have to have help when we have birth, when we give birth. Um, we're the only species that has what we call mandatory midwifery. The only other species that ever did is Neanderthal. And the reason that we have mandatory midwifery is because the shape of our head versus the shape of our shoulders, it kind of creates a T, and the shape of our pelvic outlet is like this. So we actually have to turn our children twice when we're giving birth. Okay. So we must have somebody else help us to birth our children. We must have community to give birth. We are nurturing as a species biologically because our life stages are the most life stages of any other species. Even Neanderthal only has 4 life stages from neonate to adult, and we only rate to adult. We don't rate after adult. But from neonate to adult, we have 5 life stages. Currently, this is 25 years, and this is all about our brain development. It's all about the ability for our brain to develop in a larger space and be more malleable, understanding more. These 5 life stages are why we think of ourselves as so brilliant. Like all of the things that we do is because of these 5 life stages. To get us through these 5 life stages, we have to be nurtured. We know this from studies in the 50s where they proved failure to thrive, where they put orphans in 2 different rooms. In one room, they gave love and attention to. In the other room, they propped their bottles up. And in the room where all they did was prop their bottles up, the children died. This is failure to thrive. We know that we must nurture our children. That nurturing interaction actually helps their brain grow. Recent studies have proven that it truly does take a village to raise a child, and that just having 2 parents is not enough. This is something that science has proven. There's studies on it. They've looked at different hunter-gathering communities. It literally takes 30 people to raise a child from neonate to adult in a healthy manner, especially if we're looking to prior to now. But even today, if you are a single parent, it still takes other people in your life to help you raise that child, whether or not it's the babysitter, whether or not it's the person working at the grocery store that makes sure that you can get your groceries, your employer, your coworkers. It doesn't matter. It still takes many different people to nurture a child from neonate to teachers to neonate, from neonate to adulthood. Again, that's 25 years currently. It's probably been less in this past, but it is still 5 life stages. No other species has 5 life stages. No other species has this extended childhood. The other species that have a long period of childhood, orangutan and bonobos, are like 9 and 8 years. Elephants are like 5 years. Whales are like 10 years. There are other species that have an extended childhood because they have really great brains. We have the longest, and it requires nurture from here to here to get here. And it requires nurture of more than just one person because you have to have all of this is on YouTube. I record at the same time, so you can go and watch any of it on YouTube. And there's back lives there as well. So the moments we have to have multiple people tend us from neonate to adulthood, and the reasoning is many and varied. In a community where you have a hunter-gatherer community or a collector community, you have people that have to go out and get things. You need at least 10 people to go hunting in a time when it's very primitive. You need to make sure that you're safe against predators and that you can actually kill things, right? You need a few people to go down with you even to collect water, to make sure that there's English is a bastardized language made up of 10 different languages, and nothing is pronounced right in the United States, anyways. So don't correct my English. Um, when we are looking at the needs, right, it takes many different people to go out and collect. It takes many different people to go out and do things. And while people are out collecting them, and while people are out doing things, somebody has to stay home with the child. You need somebody who's making tools. You need somebody who's tending the fire. You need somebody who's creating clothing. We are biologically nurturing and communal as a species. Okay. We're also biologically creative. We're the species that adapts our adaptations. We're the only species that adapts our adaptations. Many different species have tools. Many different species adapt their surroundings. We're the only ones that adapt those things further. So we're also very creative. We are very creative because we are nurturing and communal. Okay. You live in a society today that teaches you that to be nurturing and communal is a problem, that you shouldn't be taking care of each other, that you should separate yourself. Individuality is a prize instead of understanding that all of your individual traits are supposed to be committed to community, that are supposed to be given to community so community can grow, so the community can do better, right? So we are taught not to be nurturing and not to be communal. We have an entire society based on this idea that we should hate each other. And because of that, many of us are dealing with depression. Many of us are dealing with anxiety. Many of us feel like we can't fit into this society and we can't figure out why. So we think that we're the problem. We think that we're the issue because we can't fit into this society. And it leads to a lot of depression. It leads to a lot of problems. I need you to understand today that that is a healthy response to an unhealthy society. Society is currently sick, and your depression at children being murdered. You're feeling like you can't fit into a society that wants you to be hateful and mean. You're feeling like you can't leave your house like me because you know people are going to be shitty and attack you. All of those things are a healthy response to an unhealthy situation, an unhealthy society. So if you're dealing with depression, if you are dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with this, why can't I fit in? Why can't I make it work? Why is it not working for me? I need you to understand that you're having a healthy response to an unhealthy situation. You are worthy just by existing. You don't have to be exploitable by somebody else. You don't have to do things for other people, though community and being a part of community always increases worth, right? But you don't have to be exploitable. You don't have to, you know, harm people. You don't have to partake in the sickness to be worthy. You are worthy just by breathing. You are worthy just by existing. And understanding that this is an unhealthy situation, all of these feelings of depression, anxiety, why am I not fitting in? Why can't I get it? All of those feelings, that healthy response to the unhealthy situation actually increase your worth. And the reason that these things increase your worth is because you're awake, you can see, you know what's going on. And it is only by seeing, it is only by understanding that we can affect change. It is only by understanding that we can affect change. To be considered sane in an insane society is no compliment. And this is very true. And you know that most insanity is actually thinking that your government is out to kill you. Like most of the list of things that they consider to be insane, the top thing on the list is thinking the government's out to harm you. So if you're awake, you're insane by society standards. So this is a healthy response and it is a necessary response because by understanding what is going on, right? By understanding the problem that the problem exists, you can affect change. If you can't see that there's a problem, you can't affect change. If you're not feeling compassion and empathy, you might actually be the problem. If you can't see that there's an issue, if it doesn't hurt you, if there's not something in your mind going, this is fucked up, you can't affect change. You can't make change because you can't see the necessary need for it. So you are worthy just by existing. You are worthy just by breathing, and your worth increases when you look at this and see the problem. And I need you to understand that you can't fit into it because you're healthy and they're not. I need you to understand your worth. Most likely, you give grace and compassion to everybody else. They might be beating you, and you look for the reason why. Well, I'm going to give them grace because they're only acting this way because somebody else did it to them. And most likely, you don't give that same grace and same compassion to yourself. So, what I'm asking of you today is to give grace and compassion to yourself. You are worthy of grace and compassion and love just by existing. You are worthy of giving yourself that grace and compassion. So I'm asking you today to understand that you are worthy just by existing. Understand that you are having a healthy response to an unhealthy society, and to give yourself grace and compassion today because it is necessary to you. And it is necessary to all of us. And you are necessary to all of us. Hi, beautiful. So, with that, I am going to go ahead and take away. You are awesome. Actually, me and Sugars were talking about how awesome you are this morning, Star. Give yourself grace and compassion today. You deserve grace and compassion. You are worthy of grace and compassion because you are alive. You don't have to do anything, just breathing. You are worthy of grace and compassion. So please today give yourself that grace and compassion, especially because it's unlikely that you are getting it elsewhere, right? Give yourself grace, give yourself compassion, give yourself love. Take care of yourself because you deserve it. Absolutely. And remember that I love you. Just by breathing, I love you. Just by existing, I love you. Okay. Take care of yourself. Give yourself grace and compassion today. Much love to every single one of you. You are Starville. You're a wonderful person, so you should be surrounded by wonderful people. We're talking about how, oh, see, there's Sugars. I'm leaving though, you guys. I love you so much. Take care, everybody. So much love to you all. Glad to find you too. Glad you were able to make it in. And I know that there's actually a lot of new people in today. And so I welcome you, and please remember how loved you are. Please remember how deserving of grace and compassion you are today. And I'll probably be back tomorrow. And today, if you're celebrating, if you're feasting, please remember to hold time and space for the truth of today. That today is about celebrating a massacre, that women and children died so that we could celebrate today. And please hold space for that. It is perfectly okay to celebrate abundance. It's perfectly okay to feast with your family and love your family. Please remember within that people were harmed for today, that it needs to be acknowledged and it needs to be seen, right? And if anything, if you can't do anything else, sit for a minute. Sit for a minute with your family and hold love and honor for the people who died today, for the people who were harmed for the making of today. Again, give yourself grace and compassion. Give yourself love. Remember you're worthy. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you all later. Absolutely. And that's a great way to do it, user. Think of the people in the land that you exist on today. There's a lot of different ways to find that. Think of the people of the land that you exist on today and do what you can to uplift their needs, to uplift their decolonization, to uplift their ability to work forward and think forward. Take care, everybody. Have a great one. Much love. I can figure out how to use TikTok, right?